So those in Setup Search's orbit know that we love a good multi-position search, especially when there's a follow-up multi-position search. In our latest video series, we go desk side with longtime client and friend Dave Marchese, CEO of Caliche Development Partners 2. Hey Dave, how's it going?
Hey Jen, I'm doing great. It's good to see you virtually.
You too. Of course, this is how we do most of our work, so it actually feels kind of natural, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Good. So we're going to touch on a few things. We're going to talk about searching and finding transformational leaders, since that is the main gist of what we do for you. We're going to talk about your latest venture, a little bit of energy transition, the private equity pullback, and a few other things. How's that sound?
Sounds fantastic.
All right. So I was trying to remember how we actually met. And I think it was at an event for ACG. Is that correct?
I think so.
Okay.
This is pre-Caliche days when I was still at the private equity fund.
Okay, that's right. And then when you called me during COVID, I have to bring up the COVID ponytail that you had going during COVID. It was
right.
Awesome. You didn't get to keep that, obviously.
I did not keep
allowed.
the COVID ponytail. I got a haircut, even though I've got helmet hair today, I got a haircut yesterday. So
Okay, we have done 9 positions for you for your first rendition of Caliche, and the second one, everything from Senior Vice President of Operations, I think was our first, Chief Commercial, and then we've done plant managers, helium operators, and Director of Strategy, you name it. So it's a pretty wide swath of different positions that we did. I think one of the main things I want to ask you is what lessons have you learned? You've done this twice now, or you're on your second one now. What lessons have you learned in regards to talent? What kind of talent do you feel like you have to look for versus someone as a corporation or one of the energy majors?
Yeah. Well, I think the first lesson I learned kind of stems from calling you during COVID, which is, there can be historically in the private equity industry a bias to what they like to say as we recruit within our network. And, it's not necessarily about we don't want to pay a recruiter or we don't want to pay, a placement fee. I think it's a lot of pride in the people that those funds know, and they know them well, and they tend to be very tied in.
Yeah.
I think what I learned was that even when you're hiring within your network, the structure that someone like Setup Search brings to the type of positions that we hire for, I think is critical. And it's helpful for me to also have a process so I can describe, if there is someone in my network, I can describe to them, we're using this process. You're talking to Jen or Hazel or whoever's working on that placement. And I think the separation of the executives at the company from some of the blocking and tackling of the recruiting process allows us to, first of all, be a little more dispassionate about how we're making the decision. Secondly, allow us to focus on the things that we need, which is, running the company as well as sort of how this position fits in. And third, it just allows a little space so that when you're having those communications, the communications with each of the candidates is a little more crisp, especially the ones that are from your network.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that is a very good way to put it, is we're going to make sure they check those requirements boxes, and you don't just fall in love with the personality or cultural fit. We're going to make sure they can do that job and do it quickly, because you're not in this for the, forever. Right. You need them to perform very quickly.
Well, so, I think another learning is we do have a great network, but you all sourced Josh for us to be the plant manager at GTS now. And while we all knew of Josh, he was quote unquote in our network. You sourced him. We didn't call Josh. So I think that was one of those other learnings, which is you can say you're going to your network, but you might not think about it the same way someone like Jen, you or one of your team members might think about going about who you call. And so I think that that's another one where it's really helpful to take a step back and go, okay, yes, I think that I as a CEO or members of our team think that we can recruit inside our networks, but at the same time, you all bring a different angle to it that really allows us to find someone like Josh, who's the best candidate, who had some skills that, frankly, we hadn't even thought about and, wasn't on our list.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a full body of work. We're going to reach out to everyone and anyone that could possibly be a fit. And you never know where people are in their lives, that this may be the right time for them to make a move. So, all right. So I'm going to shift gears just a little bit here. So we've both been pretty vocal about how all the talent and resources to lead the energy transition are right here in Texas, and specifically Houston especially. And there's a lot of movement in the upper job market with folks rebranding their skills to be in this energy transition. So I'm curious to know what you think. What do you think we should expect next?
You mean other than another placement assignment for you?
Well, I wasn't hinting at that, but that's fine.
Well, that's coming. What should we expect next? I think that what we should expect is the companies, first of all, looking internally. And I mentioned sort of coming from networks and trying to apply your networks and thinking about it in a certain way. And I think that works well for us. We had some folks that worked with us with Caliche on early days on energy transition. They've moved on to sort of bigger companies and platforms. I think that's a function of twofold. First, in going to our network, we as smaller companies need to be aware that someone from a larger organization might not be comfortable with the risk taking or the lack of sort of broad resources that they will encounter when they come to a firm of 30 people instead of 30,000.
That's right.
I think with that, one of the things that we as a company need to make sure we're doing is leaning on folks like you to help us assess each individual candidate in the way that is not just by their technical proficiency, but also by their fit to the company. And so I think what's going to happen is a lot of the skills that you describe are latent in large organizations. So you'll see large organizations mine their own talent to put in those groups, possibly mine talent from each other. I've seen some big moves to the large integrateds, where someone goes from another medium-sized integrated to the large integrated, but kind of within the big companies. And I think in the things that you and I do and where the private capital is going, it's finding those right personalities that have been in those larger organizations, but that can also execute in a smaller company with a little bit less resource and some uncertainty that isn't there if, as David Sangman likes to say, your picture's on your name badge. It's our cutoff on company size. Your company is so big that
that's a good way to put it.
Your picture on your name badge, or can you come to work and know everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. Good. So to that end, on the energy transition, a lot of the what I call fast action in energy transaction, let's get this done in the next 2 to 5 years versus 20, 30 and beyond, is happening by private equity. What should we make, or what do you think is going to happen since the private equity has kind of pulled back on some of that? Do you think that's going to hurt us?
I haven't seen a pullback on private equity in energy transition at all.
Okay, good.
I have seen it in the upstream. I think the LP community is looking for, less exposure to the drill bit.
Yeah.
I think in energy transition, the challenge has been that historically over the last 10 to 15 years, other than in the upstream, the LP community has not been comfortable taking development risk. That's, the risk on those first 10 to $20 million that could go to zero if you don't have a project. Mm-hmm. And I think that the challenge is getting the LP community through these general partners, the private equity funds that we as companies go to get funded, getting those GPs the right business plans and the right risk return metrics so they can describe to their limited partners, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it. And yes, you are getting the types of exposure that you, limited partner, are looking for in the energy transition.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right, I think last question. I'm going to indulge myself just a little bit here. I would love for you to share, what do you think are the advantages? And you kind of touched on this, but the advantages of using retained executive search like what we do.
Well, I said all the fluffy stuff, so I'll say the hard stuff, which is it just takes too much time. Honestly, I mentioned, we're at 24 people right now. Mm-hmm. We don't have the time in the day to run a search. It's just something that it's a full-time job, and it's not our full-time job.
And we're pretty, a lot of times we put 3-4 people on one search alone. I think you also have you win the honor of using every single person at our firm at some point or another. So congratulations, I think, are in order.
All positive feedback too.
Yeah, good. Well, I think that is it. I really appreciate you being our guinea pig and our inaugural guest for these living case studies.